What we have here, the sheets that you have, and what the lecture is going to try to do today, is simply give you a general introduction to what the whole program is about. What's CVSP? What am I doing in this kind of a course? So I'm going to give you a little bit of a historical background to see how at the American University of Beirut we are now, we have a unit called Civilization Studies Program, CSP. Well, it didn't just come out of the sky. This came through history. Basically, universities had always meant basically the humanities, and that everything one does as a human being then comes out of the fullness of understanding our own human situation, ourselves as human beings. Then we can be engineers, doctors, lawyers, whatever we become, but we're not just doing it as a technical skill, but we're doing it as a full human being, aware of our environment, our context, our relationships at every single level. The more we can become aware of what's affecting us and influencing us, and the more we can understand it better, the more we can develop our own humanity personally, and the more we can be a help to humanity generally, society generally, to develop. And I think you'll be happy to see this, certainly in some of the things you're doing clearly. Much of this semester will try to help you see how you're not separate from others, that human beings are not atoms. Now, we may take that as a simple statement, but that, in fact, in the modern period, when we start to have individualism becoming more and more important, the focus on the individual and even the individual against society, or the society becomes the enemy. Society becomes the enemy. Well, much of this semester you'll be seeing that you cannot separate yourself from the context of other human beings. Parents, family, and then as you grow up, friends, enemies, just human relationships generally, at work, at school, wherever you're going. Okay? You are part and parcel of humanity, and that's why we call it the humanities. Now this comes in very different ways and throughout the centuries and all of this, but this is the basic insight, if you like, about the kind of course we're dealing with. We're dealing with texts that are the product of mostly dead people. And so Descartes, in the 16th century, 17th century, had stated that reading a book from the past is like having the opportunity to actually meet somebody from the past, and not just anybody from the past, but somebody from the past who can really help us understand what was happening in human history, what was happening in the past, how were people developing as human beings, what were they thinking about? Not just the technological development, that comes from the development of our humanity. The technological and all the other things that we're mostly interested in nowadays, we wouldn't have them at the level we have them had we not had development in the human being who is working on them and producing them. And insofar as we don't have the human development along with the technological development, then we have the chaos that often we run into, even in the, so some things in the 21st century may appear horrible to somebody from other centuries previous to us. So this is the development of civilization. It's always an interaction. It's always, there's no one simple line that it's following. There is development in certain things, but there is sometimes going backwards in other things. And so you'll be focusing on the human being in all of the courses in CVSP. So it's the study of civilizations. If you look at the sheet, just for the history of it, it was first called General Education, and it started here at the American University of Beirut in the sort of during the first half of the 20th century, when one of our professors here went to Columbia University and Harvard and came back specifically from Harvard, but having been exposed to the Columbia University Great Books program. And why did Columbia University develop this Great Books program, which then other universities quickly started to copy and use, and then it hit AUB in the early 20th century, and all the universities around us today have this component in it, taking it, much of it from what was being done in AUB and then developing it. It was general education, an antidote, so if you look at the sheet now for a little while, an antidote to specialization, but complementary to specialization. It doesn't replace the specialization you're doing in getting your BA or your BSc and then your MAs and MScs and your PhDs. All the specialization is very, very important for progress and for development, etc. But on its own, just that kind of specialization leads to much of the chaos, the human chaos that happens in history when the focus goes off of the development, along the same line, a parallel development of our humanity. So what is our humanity? That's the question, and that's what you'll be doing in these general education courses. It was changed to cultural studies, a study of different cultures, from which the CS comes from. Have any of you ever been told by any of your grandparents or parents or friends, did you ever hear the term CS before today? No, you see, it's dying out now because the program has been really hit for some time now. Ever since the year 2000, the program has been in great jeopardy, and we're trying now to bring it back to something of what it was all the way up to the year 2000, from the middle of the 20th century. And for about 50 years, it was a very, very potent program. So, CS, cultural studies. And then, because cultural studies became a part of the social sciences, where you do an empirical study more than anything else of different cultures. And so, to distinguish ourselves from cultural studies, as in the social sciences, how it is being done in the philosophical sense, so in the humanities particularly, more and more into the philosophical aspect of understanding our cultures. What kind of philosophies did they produce? What kind of understandings of human life did they produce? And how did they present it through different texts, not just through philosophy? But the Epic of Gilgamesh, the first work you will be reading, is a monumental presentation of a philosophy of life that there was many cultures of this time that spanned all that area up there that you're seeing on the map. Peoples from that whole period, little by little, produced for us what we now have as the Epic of Gilgamesh, which was discovered in the middle of the 19th century only, and it was immediately, once it was decoded, and you'll be told all about that in the next lecture on Gilgamesh next Monday, but this is just a general introduction to give you an idea of what's happening. Peoples in this period, in this area, produced what we now have as the Epic of Gilgamesh, and this presents a philosophy of life. What's life all about? What do we, the problem of death, and the problem of death not just as something when you're young or when it's not a threat to you, but when death really grips you, when somebody very close to you dies, and you start to see yourself in this other person. You say we're never just atoms. All right, we understand ourselves the more we relate with others. We understand ourselves the more we see what's happening to others. Existential knowledge that is parallel to, but the basis of perhaps really good and fruitful speculative and theoretical knowledge is good existential knowledge, a knowledge of life, practically speaking. What is life all about? What am I as a human being? I get a lot of help through books and things like that, but the basic thing in the kind of knowledge we want to know when we ask, what's a human being? Who am I? What's life all about? It's something I'm accumulating, learning, reflecting on, developing every minute of my life, every day of my life. And the more I use my mind and the more I have access to universities and how to study it more carefully, the more I will be gaining this existential knowledge, this kind of wisdom, if you like. And that's what our CVSP program was meant to help you not lose. You have, all the economic pressure and the family pressure and the social pressure and, become a lawyer, become a doctor, become a this, become a that. And they don't worry enough about telling you become a human. Worry about how human you're becoming and learn how to become even more human, as you develop that. The existential knowledge of what life is all about is the basis is like the trunk of the tree, and the branches are all the wonderful things we learn in the technology and the specializations in the different departments. So CS, Cultural Studies, became Civilization Sequence because it was a sequence. 4 semesters, all students took 201, 202, 203, 204 in sequence. And so you had an idea of how history was developing, how history of thought was developing, how, not everything obviously, but enough so that you get an idea of the development of history. You get an idea of interaction of cultures. You get an idea of how one culture develops from another and how they, debate with each other and how they learn from each other and how they develop. 201, 202, 203, 204. Since the year 2000, that has no longer been what is happening. So our program has now become like a mesa, a table full of food, a smorgasbord, and you pick a little bit from here, and you pick a little bit from here, and you pick a little bit from here. So you don't get what this kind of a program is meant to do. So, but why am I mentioning this is because it's a very important part of your education. And hopefully you can try to get it in whatever way you can. It used to be there as something that helped students who were still groping their way through life at this point to do that. So, civilization sequence, that's when it became CVSP, to differentiate it from computer studies, which became CS. See how these things go? So now we're CVSP. But civilization sequence program, I don't know of any other university that had such a name for the program. So professors started complaining that our colleagues in other universities don't know what we're doing. We have to always explain it to them. All right, let's just call it, since we don't want to call it cultural studies or general education anymore, let's call it civilization studies, very simply. It's still CS, civilization studies, but it's nothing like what the program was meant to do. If you don't get a basic sort of vertebra upon which you can hang many things that are happening in the world today, and then on that basis you can bring in all the other cultures that are not directly addressed. You're not getting the whole program the way it was meant to do for you. Now, arts and science students are required to take one Sequence 1 course, and Sequence 1 courses are 201, 202, 205, and 207. See, we now have a 205, 206, 207, 208. We used to only have 201, 202, 203, 204. Now we have, in addition, 205, 206, 207, 208, which continually confuses me as well as everybody else, I'm sure. So please focus on that. So the Sequence 1 courses are 201, 202, and then you jump to 205, and you jump to 207. All four of those fulfill the requirement. No one of them can possibly do what you would get if you took 201 and 202. But that's where we are now, 205. If you've taken 201, then you cannot take 202. If you start with 202, you cannot take 201. I'm so sorry. See, this is the problem of having too much to do. By the way, as director of the program, I say hello to you all, and please stop asking me to raise capacity for you. It's taking up much too much of my time. And so, I'm just empathy for me. I'm now doing what I like to do, but it's coming out of a whole bureaucratic climate. So be patient with me. 201, 202, 205, or 207 is the visa for any other CVSP course you take. Please remember that. Because people keep coming and telling me, oh, I was told that if I take 202, I can't take 201, or if I take 204, I can't take 201. All you need is a visa into CVSP. Think of that. The visa is any CVSP Sequence 1 course. As soon as you've taken any one of those, you can take anything else you like. But you cannot take Sequence 2 courses until you're a full junior. All right? Because we don't want you to rush through this thing in your first 2 semesters at university and then forget about it. We want this to accompany you, the whole program, the experience of the program, to accompany you as much as possible now that it can't in 4 courses unless you choose. You can still choose to take 201, 202, 203, or 4. You can choose anything. But now, the visa to everything is any one of those. The Sequence 2 courses are 203, 204, 206, and 208. Okay, those are Sequence 2, and you cannot take them until you're a junior and until you've had one CVS Sequence 1 course. So please remember that, and when you ask for advice, try to give them the proper advice to your friendly students, although they should get all this from their advisors. Okay, so what is it all about? It's about being able to contact people from other centuries, all right? Gilgamesh, thousands of years ago. All right? You can now meet the people who produced that epic through what they produced, because what you produced is part of you, and especially if you're presenting your own thought in something that others can continue to read and look at. It's a way of communicating with people throughout the centuries. So the people who've come before us can communicate with us through their books. And if we don't look at their books, we'll miss out on a lot of what humans went through and why we are where we are now. And when you don't know where you come from, you really can never know where you're going in a very serious sense. So take these courses seriously. You now can take humanities courses, and so many, many wonderful courses you can take, but no longer are you going to get the 4 in that way. So, great books, that was the title of the Columbia University program, the Great Books program, meaning that through books, what is a great book or what is a classic? And, words can become slogans and come, positively and negatively. People can attack them for silly reasons and people can impose them for silly reasons. Try always to find the meaning behind what these works are. A great book, a classic, this is one way, just the way I have it on the sheet here, one way of simply getting you to think about what they are. They are simply works that have endured, they've survived. They've endured the test of time, not just survived, but endured. People have gotten rid of so much else, so they burnt books and done that. These have survived into our own day. So they've endured the test of time. And they have endured the test of a variety of cultures. Many cultures in the world, one could say almost today, they're all cultures that are interacting with each other at a cultural level, intellectual level. Go back to these books and use these books in one way or another. Not to take the book and then just follow it, pedantically or something like that, but to get inspiration from it, to learn about what the whole process of true intellectual and cultural and human development is really like. So they are works that have endured the test of time and the variety of cultural evolution. Texts that continue to impact human lives. You'll find that these, if you go through that whole program, you'll find they are texts that are impacting you and me right now. But we don't know. Sometimes we think, oh, there's a new discovery now. Evolution has just been discovered. Yeah, we'll see that in the Greek world, they were already talking about evolution and discussing it and accepting it or rejecting it. So it's not, and we wouldn't be talking about it without having that history of it having come up to where we are today. Whatever we talk about today is a product of how others have already lived and thought about freedom and slavery and democracy and dictatorship and justice and friendship and death and meaning in life and all of this. These are things that we ask all the time. So the questions that we deal with in humanities generally, supposedly, but in CVSP specifically, are questions that humans seem to have been asking all through the history of communicated human life. Questions that we still ask. Gilgamesh will ask the question, why do I have to die? And why do I have to die in this horrible way? And why do I have to go to this horrible place? Why do I have to do that? Well, I just accept it? Forget it, baby. I'm not going to accept it. I'm going to search and seek, and otherwise we wouldn't have better answers to the question of death today. If you didn't have, so put yourself in the shoes of the people you're reading there. Don't judge them from your own point of view later on, as if you're so much smarter and more and clever. If you're nearly as clever as they, you would be very happy. All right, but they had much less information than we have. We have more information, but we don't have more intelligence. We don't have more wisdom. We don't have more, humanity than they had necessarily. Right? So Gilgamesh refuses, in the story of Gilgamesh, he refuses to accept this horrible truth. That's the truth. You're going to die. And you're not just going to die, which he was accepting as long as he was strong and powerful and, as an abstract thing, be mature and accept that you're going to die. That's wonderful. But then you meet death head on. He meets death head on in the death of his best friend, his equal, his friend, his second self in himself. All right? Dies in a horrible way and has a dream and tells him about the dream about where he's going. The afterlife, horrible place. What does he do? Sit back and become a very intelligent 20th century, blasé, cool person and say, oh, yeah, well, death, that's it. I'm just going to live like that. No. He rebels. And that's the point of these stories, to tell you how their rebellion has moved history forwards. When you read the book, you'll see his own people are saying, he's the only one who did anything for them. He brought back so much knowledge for them. He helped them so much. He's a wonderful man. He's a great man. All right? They did not look upon them. They did not look upon Gilgamesh as a symbol of a stupid human or an immature human. They looked upon him as this is the best a human can possibly do. And that remains to be the best a human can possibly do, whatever your culture changes. You have more information, you have more options, but as a human, you will either lie back passively and give in to fate in this kind of negative way, and just be a slob and be mediocre, yalla dabbir halak, wasatli if you don't cheat, and all the expressions like this. No, you maintain your personal dignity. This is what Gilgamesh does. You search and you seek. One person has received immortality in the story, so he goes on. He refuses not to just accept the truth about death until he has made the scientific, empirical investigation. He goes, and at the risk of his own health and everything, to find Utnapishtim, the one who is immortal. So read these stories as much as you can, empathetically. Try to put yourself in the shoes of the human beings that are the heroes of these stories. Don't just judge them from your own point of view. And you'll miss the whole point, and the whole exercise will be useless. All right? If you don't gain in your empathy, your ability to understand something from their own point of view, and using their own language and their own concepts and their own understanding and their own questions, you can't go on to then dialogue with them. Dialogue always has to start with understanding the other point of view. And then you can start to have a proper dialogue and disagree and appreciate and reject and develop. And this is the excitement of interaction of cultures. But the only significant dialogue that I know of in my 76 years, I know you think I'm 77, I'm only 76, but the only significant anything that's come up of all the dialogues I've been involved with is a dialogue where people really listen to the other person, really listen to the other side of what's being said, and really try to understand them, put themselves in their place. They can still disagree with them fully, but now by having put themselves in the place of this other person, in their own shoes, in their own context, understanding where they're coming from, number one, I learned so much from these other things that I thought I disagreed with. That's number one. But number two, I can now engage in a fruitful dialogue with them. Not just be preaching at them or imposing on them and telling them what the latest fashion is and that everybody should be like that. Or, I can start to interact with the various cultures. And I hope not everybody becomes one culture in this world. That would be death to the human world. As long as we have many vibrant cultures and people within them who are really living them at their best and really can communicate it to one another, and as long as people learn to listen to the other and try to get into their... Then that's the main aspect of this whole program. CVSP... That's the main aspect of it. 201, 202, 203, 204, handled properly in that way, is a very, very exciting program, and we're hoping to resurrect it because it's dead. But we can still use the spirit of it and try to communicate it to you all in whatever course we're doing. So it's a window into looking at the fly sheet. Sorry I'm having to take time on this, but this does take time. It's not, I don't have to go through everything on these sheets, but the first parts are very important. It's like a window, therefore, to summarize what I've been trying to say. This program is like a window into a broad variety of human experience, a dialogue with humans of the past, as well as of the present. Humanities. One way we used to think about it for a long time was anthropology, cultural studies, but from a philosophical point of view. Not from a social science point of view, strict social science, empirical investigation type of thing, because social science also has a philosophical component, of course, but in a strictly, because there were schools of philosophical anthropology in the world of philosophy in the 20th century, and some of them are still alive. So it's looking at the human being from the kind of, what is philosophy? Philosophy is a love of wisdom, so don't think of philosophy as the specialization of philosophy. Philosophical meaning reflecting on life, trying to put it into logical and into cohesive form that can be communicated to others so that others can think about it and learn something from it. But at the broadest level of investigation, after you do your physics and your math and your biology and everything else you do, you then sit back and you take a look at the whole package from a global point of view, from a human point of view, from a humanistic point of view, from a philosophical point of view, in this meaning, because words have so many different meanings. You have to define them every time you use them. So philosophical in this sense. What was the philosophy, the philosophy of life of the people who lived in this segment geographically in the ancient world thousands of years ago, they produced a philosophy of life which we can understand by reading the Epic of Gilgamesh. Okay, so that's the first one. And we'll be doing this for all the other things you read in 201, of course. Okay, but to help you to focus on how to deal with this, we had always used this technique or this analysis, this analytical approach. We try to get some information, some clarity, some light on what they understood about the human being as such. You know, what am I? Not just physically and chemically, but I mean, is it my beauty? Is it my strength? Is it my power? Is it my status in society? What makes me a human being? What is it that I can say, you know, this is a fuller human, a less human? Shakespeare, if you've ever met him, said, a rose by any other name would smell as sweet, all right? A rose is a rose is a rose, right? A dog is a dog is a dog. But is a human a human a human? Well, that's a question, but all of these people have been taking the assumption that human beings are a project. Humans become human. They're not just born human. They're born with a capacity, and then this capacity develops. And that development of that capacity is the whole point. It isn't automatic. It's challenging. It's difficult. And so the whole literature of 201 will be to challenge us to go for the excellent, not to be satisfied with the mediocre. The only one that will tell us to be satisfied with the mediocre will be Lucretius and Epicureanism, so that you can, it's a respectable philosophy. You may wish to go into that way, but at least since that is the general sort of feeling of the world, that it's good to go back and sort of try to see some of these other views, these more heroic, but only in this sense. Don't be a nobody. Don't be a slob. Don't give up. Don't just, don't just worship something that's stupid. You have no reason to worship it. Okay, the whole world of polytheism. When you come to Oedipus the king, why should he worship Apollo? Why should he believe Apollo? Apollo, when we get there, I'm telling you just an example of when we get to Apollo tells him, you're going to kill your father and marry your mother. He sends him that message. So he goes to see Apollo, the god Apollo, and he tries to figure out, what's going on? Why should I have to kill my father, marry my mother? Give me some help. So what does he do? Through his medium, of course, and through his procrastinators, all the people who make millions of dollars by giving you astrological information in the beginning of the year, what does Mike Fraley see in 2019? He goes, what does he get then? All he gets is this kind of help from the divine, all right? I see that you are going to have a horrible future, killing your father and marrying your mother. He doesn't give me any help. What does he do? Fate, I must accept what the gods have given me. La habibi. If this is a god, then I'm better than this god, and why should I worship this god? All right? So this brings up the whole question of the divine, and what is the divine? And there's so many different understandings of the divine, and don't think there's only one, and don't try to make polytheism, monotheism, or philosophical theism, monism, monotheism. They're different from each other, and that's what's exciting. You can always learn something from each of them. Don't try to make everything into the one global soup that happens, and you lose all the flavor of life that you get by getting into what other people have thought. He rebels. Oedipus rebels. He refuses to accept this stupid thing. He's not going to sit around and wait to kill his father, marry his mother. All right? That wouldn't make him a pious, religious man. All right? That would make him a stupid idiot. All right? He does the only thing he can do. He tries to see whether there's a way out. And, of course, because they were, put yourself in the shoes of that culture, they had come, part of the tragedies had come to believe firmly that that's what life is all about. But what it stresses when we get to Oedipus the king, the same thing that you get here in Gilgamesh. Don't submit to something stupid. Religion and God and all these have meaning. And you have to study them and get into them and see the depths of them and see their best. Don't look at them in this kind of silly, superficial way. All right? If anybody asks you to do something that's stupid, all right, this will bring you to thinking about Abraham if you're Abrahamic. God tells Abraham, go kill your first son. Okay, so you can say, you see, look how horrible that is. But you see, take it out of context. He does this because Abraham is in a polytheistic culture where this is the norm. You want to really show your devotion to a god, you're ready to kill your first son to them. Sacrificing, this was a way of showing your respect. So he wanted to see whether Abraham could get the point. So whether he, just how much he appreciates how much God had done for him. That's faith. You see, faith is the appreciation of something you've experienced, not a belief system that you're born into and then you follow, blah, 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 blah. All right? Abraham had now experienced this monotheistic God, supposedly. That's their story, in other words. You get that in 202. So that he was ready to show his gratitude and trust to this God whom he has experienced. And I can trust him. This is a horrible thing, but everybody's doing it in my culture. That's why it doesn't take too much time to do it. All the other gods tell us to do this. He goes to do it, and what does the monotheistic God that's in that story tells him, don't do it. And after that, the monotheistic world stopped killing their children. All right? So you put things out of context, you get these silly slogans and people fighting each other for their, because they want to develop their latest wonderful view of things, and so they take things totally out of context. But in Oedipus' situation and Gilgamesh's situation, there was no good God. There was no God who you could trust that they, from their own point of view. They were just these gods, mafia bosses. Who's controlling Lebanon? Can you trust anybody here? I hope so. I don't know. All right? That's the image that's being projected into the polytheistic gods. That's what you're getting in the polytheistic culture you're doing. They're projected into insofar as they're projecting culturally and intellectually into the popular belief in all these gods to try to talk about them in some way that they can talk about them. The first way they talk about them in Gilgamesh is really much like mafia bosses controlling a country, and they give you good things if you're good to them, and they're not that they're evil or something like that, fully evil. They're evil in the sense that they control you, and they're not happy. They're not looking for a way to give you a better country or a better Lebanon or a better no garbage on the streets or that. They'll do something about that. They have to, but will they really do anything serious to help you? Why should you trust them? Oh, well, we'll elect them again, Mahek, everybody, all of you who are Lebanese. Next time around, we'll elect them again, and then we'll complain about them again. All right, so this stuff is part and parcel of humanity, human development. Each one of these texts is addressing a certain political situation, economic situation, social situation, human situation, which always includes a belief in trying to understand, what about the powers that are the greater powers there are than just humans, all right, the gods. The divine. Don't say God. God is only for those who've come to believe and convinced that there is one God, either Abrahamic God or an Aristotelian God or the God of philosophy. But gods with a small g is much better. So the god Apollo gives him no help to Oedipus, for instance, but he rebels. He doesn't want to sit around waiting to kill his daddy and marry his mommy. Fate, He runs away from home, and that's, you'll go into that story. But that's the heart of what these humans are representing. They're presenting us heroes, but a hero was supposed to speak to you about your own humanity. What can you see that's great in what they were doing in their context? Don't judge them from another, some other standard or something like that. What were they doing in their context, as much as we can understand? And that's what we try to do with you. Try to help you see the context of each of these books, the context of each of these heroes, how they were responding to their context. You can't do more than that. How they were using reason to respond. How Gilgamesh was using his reason. Utnapishtim, there is a survivor. Why should I accept that nobody can get away from death? I'm going to go and find him. He's using his reason, right? Oedipus is using his reason. Why should I trust this Apollo who's telling me I have to kill my father, marry my mother? What have I gotten from Apollo when you read Oedipus the king? What new curse do you have for us, Zeus? What new dread, etc. Don't miss out on this. We try to whitewash everything, in this global world and make everything everything is just as nice as everything. We miss out. We miss out on why we can even do that and try and leave the things from the past behind. So this is the human being in the socio-economic political context, their relationship to nature, the environment, right? We have corrupted the environment so much so that I can't swim in the Mediterranean anymore. The last time I did, there was a floating body coming by. I was swimming on my back. This was some time ago. And I thought it'd be a nice girl in a nice bikini. And I look, and there's a dead cow. So after that, we start to notice that the Mediterranean See, because we used to just, run down there and jump into the thing. I'm 76 after all, so don't think of the recent past. But, the whole shot of Lebanon, you go anywhere practically, you just jump right in and swim, all right? Here I was in what I thought was a safe place, and there was a dead cow coming next to me, not even on it with a bikini on. This is what about nature? Can we just do whatever we like with nature? Enter Donald Trump. Sorry, I don't want to offend anybody who loves Trump, okay? But, climate change. Oh, there's no problem with climate change. That's the stuff that you're looking at here. What's my relationship to nature? Should I be afraid of nature? They become gods. Everything more powerful than me becomes a god. All right? Sex is more powerful than me. I can't control it. It's a god. Ishtar. We'll see her soon in this pantheon. I don't have time to show you everything. I'm sorry, but Ishtar, Aphrodite, Venus, Haifa, whoever is your latest, sex symbol, all right? Okay, can any of you control sex 100%? Let me worship you, all right? You see, that's the whole, anything that, wisdom. Do you think you have all of wisdom? Athene, you see? So they become projections of human things that we can control, that we can't control, that are good, that are not controlled. When they become formulated, first, they're just popular religions and popular religious practices. But then the people come and they start to try to give meaning to it. And the first meaning they try to give to it is try to understand it and relate it to something they can understand in life. So Ishtar related to sex. Athene becomes more and more related to wisdom. Zeus becomes more and more related to justice. So that, the gods are all there, but they're now being made more understandable, more human-friendly, more reason-friendly. So you at least give them, try to understand them, not just worship them and, sacrifice your children to them or whatever it is that they decide to do. But then it develops. And when you get into the Greek world and Homer puts them all into order. He defines them all, you see? And he puts them into an order so that no one of them can go against the order. So everybody is limited, all right? And so you have the unity of the cosmos, the universe. But Zeus and Poseidon and Hades and Athene and all these other gods that people were worshiping and being afraid of and curses about if show the whole world there, okay? No one of them is absolute. That's the second level of the view of the divine we'll be seeing in 201. The first one is this rather chaotic one of Gilgamesh. Then you get into Homer, centuries later, where you get they're all in order, and no one of them can do anything that goes against the given order of things. The cosmos becomes the absolute, not just the specific gods. So this is the, nature. I stopped there. So humans as such, humans in their context, socioeconomic, political context, the way they look at nature, are nature gods, as they were then, or is nature something for us to make more dollars from, as it has become in the modern period, all right? And we don't care about it. We won't give it its proper due. Some people today are now going back to worshiping nature, and others are still ravaging nature. Right? So nothing changes. You still have the same picture for many, many centuries. Some people will say nature is something for us to conquer. We will become masters and possessors of nature, Descartes says in the early modern period. And what is knowledge? Knowledge is power. All right? Well, what about dignity? What about human rights? What about the rights of nature? What about the rights of animals? I mean, rights are simple reflection of that. We as humans recognize that we can't just play around with everything, and certainly we can't play around with each other. And so if you don't know how to handle an animal decently, you don't know how to handle a human decently. All right? They're interconnected. If you don't know how to handle nature properly, you don't know how to handle an animal or a human. It's all interconnected. And it's the splitting up of things that is something one wants to always try to come back and understand why it's happening and how. And you can do this in your university education if you're lucky enough to take the right courses and do the right things. And of course the divine. What is the divine? One God, many gods, no God, I'm God, agnosticism, we can never know, let's stop worrying about it. Or there are all kinds of approaches to the divine. Okay? And you need to be exposed to all of them. You need to understand each one in its context so you can respect the human who believes it. You don't have to accept it for yourself, but you must accept the human who believes it, and then you can dialogue with them. And if there's something destructive in it, something like that, of course you can then take care, but you can then dialogue, you can give and take. That's what the program is all about. The rest of the sheet just simply gives you basic items that you would cover in 201, 202, 203, 204, just to give you an idea of what the whole program, as a program from 201 to 204, would have taken you through, not just the names of the people, which are all very important names, but the sort of themes that they were dealing with, which we continue to deal with today. In Gilgamesh, the quest for existential wisdom. Everybody has to die. The gods are telling him, don't try, don't search, don't look, don't think. Don't think, we'll think for you. You know, the blah, blah, blah of the political world, that you're still very young and naive. But this is the stuff of Gilgamesh. The quest, he refuses. He's going to do his best to seek it for himself. And if he doesn't get it, too bad. All right? Then he will accept what he has to accept and do the best with it. But he's not satisfied. He's defeated. All right? But what is the satisfaction? The satisfaction is that he alone has brought all this knowledge back to humanity. He alone is recognized as a wonderful human. The human dignity, the immortality of his name, the immortality of what he has done for humanity. That's the heart of what you get in this tragic literature, where the heart of tragedy is greatness. All right? Not defeat. Greatness when challenged with something very horrible or very negative or very, unhelpful. You defeat the world in tragedy. It's a very high level thing. One of the reasons Nietzsche, a great man in the 19th century, went mad at the end, some people think that part of it was because he had set such a high tragic note for himself, for his own life, pursuing this kind of tragic ideal of always doing your best, always going for the best, not worrying about suffering at all, etc. So it's a very attractive kind of philosophy for certain people throughout the centuries. So you've had tragic literature all the way through. The most obvious of it in the 20th century were the atheistic existentialists in the 20th century. But it's the same basic notion there of greatness in the face of great challenge. Not to give in, just no matter how difficult it might seem, no matter how obvious it might be. Gilgamesh, stop wasting your time. Everybody knows. The gods are telling you. The humans are telling you. Don't pursue any what you're pursuing. Accept. And what's he to accept? Something he's experienced. Death of his best friend. Horrible death. And then the knowledge of what happens to you after death. Another, you're going to a horror chamber. I'm going to sit back and just do that and just become a regular human seeking power. And he had that already. It wasn't anything that he needed to seek in terms of that. He's seeking depth, human, existential wisdom. So these words are used differently, but that's how I'm using existential, meaning a wisdom that you're getting in life and you're checking it all the time and you're ready to put your money where the thing is, and you're ready to suffer for it if you really believe in it. Responsibility, high level of truth. Existential truth is a sort of truth that is useful only if you really try to live it and sacrifice for it. Without sacrifice, you have no progress in human history. If people had given up for cancer, we wouldn't start to have what we're already having, movement towards that. So in every field, if people would ever give up at any one point just because it seemed too difficult or impossible, no, that's the human spirit that you're seeing in Gilgamesh, that you'll be seeing in Oedipus, and in different ways. Socrates prefers to die unjustly than to go against his own principles of going against the law, wasta. All right, they want to, they condemn Socrates to death, falsely, of course, unjustly. His friends come because they have wasta, they have power, to get him away from it. He refuses. He sticks to his principle. You see. I don't know that I would ever do that. I don't know whether any of you would ever do that. But it gives you a kind of there's people who do things like that, who have, that we are parasites. We're living off of all the people who really did and who are still doing it throughout the thing, the non-easy, soft, just, power, what will give me success thing. So the big picture, okay, the core program, the first Gilgamesh, then we go into the Greek world for most of the semester, Homer and his two great epics. We read the second one, the Odyssey, Herodotus and Thucydides. This is not the proper one for this semester. Sometimes we'll be doing Thucydides, the history, seeing how through historical writing, philosophical truth comes to us. Through the way, even whatever they're doing, if they're doing it as a full human being, aware of what they're doing history, but they're giving us a philosophy of life. They're giving us meaning in life, wisdom through what they are presenting us that we can look at, think about, benefit from, disagree with, etc. This is what we'll be getting with each of these. Oedipus and Antigone. We're doing Oedipus now. Thucydides. Oh, there is Thucydides there. That's the second great historian, and the one that really has endured up to today. I mean, what he says about power and what he says about the challenge of power for our desire to be democratic and desire to follow reason, our desire to do that. The lust for power in the human, we have to deal with that. We can't just ignore it and just think, oh, we're all good or something. So Thucydides is the first person to really look into this and examine it in a wonderful, wonderful way. And you'll have a chance to be exposed to Thucydides. Then, of course, you get into Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Socrates, the icon hero for philosophy in this meaning, in that he refused to go against his principles. He practiced what he preached. He didn't just, preach so he could write books and become famous and become, well-known and all this. He never took a penny for what he did as a philosopher, and he was ready to go all the way according to his own beliefs, his own principles. You may disagree with him and what he did, but that he becomes an icon for. And the statement he makes, which should be for all of us at university, the unexamined life is not worth living. You may give up, you might find yourself just sort of, okay, I'll make do, and I'm going to become a doctor because my parents want to become a doctor. I'm going to become a lawyer, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do that. And you don't stop to examine what's happening in the future, what's going to happen if you go into something you really don't want to do, and that maybe there are... So in every way, the examination of our life, not just sort of, with philosophical arguments or something like that, but ongoing testing of principles with life. And this is what Socrates was doing. He was examining philosophically, but the life of the people in Athens, the life of the people in the whole situation where you had this horrible Peloponnesian War, where you had the sophists teaching that truth is all about how much power you get. Come to us as philosophers, we'll teach you how to make the worst argument defeat the better argument. So if you've killed somebody, come to us, and we'll teach you how to convince everybody that he killed you. In other words, the whole thing about the whole easy way of each of these schools, by the way, have a greatness in themselves, but the way they've kind of influenced the general atmosphere of things. That basically, this is what Socrates is. He hangs on to his principles, even if it means death, not just preaching what he was preaching to everybody, that you should respect justice, you should back truth, you should use your mind in the right way, you should all this, okay? He put his life there to ready. Plato goes on from Socrates, inspired by Socrates, and he takes us into the whole world of politics and reforming society, and so he's totally misunderstood, usually when he's presented quickly and simply, when you put yourself into the shoes of a Plato, he is trying to figure out how can we use reason to combat the sophist's view that it's all about power, not about principle. And how can we use reason to reform society? He thought he was going to try to be, to help people to start to reform society. He wasn't writing just for philosophy and for that there. So until you understand that aspect of Plato, you will not understand what he was trying to do in the work you're reading. And we used to read the Apology of Socrates, which introduced us to that whole world. We don't anymore because we're limiting the readings. But I'm sure your teachers will help you to see, and hopefully when you see his cave story and all that the whole part of it is the reform. The one who gets knowledge has to come back and give it to the society, or else he's not enlightened. What's enlightenment? Not just you getting enlightened for yourself, having a wonderful mystical experience, or feeling you are at the top of the intellectual world or something. If you're not ready to come back and do something for humanity with it, to the risk of your life, this is Plato's cave story. Aristotle, the cool philosopher now, takes all of this stuff into what we have in many of our fields of study, the philosopher-scientist, extending scientific inquiry into all fields of human endeavor. giving us the rationalist heaven as an option, but only for very, very few people whose minds are capable of having that heavenly vision of the contemplation. His great contribution, of course, is as a scientist and as a philosopher and extending scientific inquiry into all fields of human endeavor. Then we move into Rome, and Rome defeated Greece militarily, but Greece defeated Rome culturally. That's the slogan. It's one way of understanding what Rome was. Rome was a continuation of the Greek world, but at bringing into it its own genius, its own the things that it brought within it. But there was a nice meeting of worlds in the Roman Empire when the Greek world came in to met the traditional Roman Republican world, and you start to have empire and globalization, and where a whole shift in what humans want from philosophy. Now, peace of mind is the main thing. In a global world, you don't have time to go into philosophy the way they had in Athens and all this. So now you want the quick philosophy. So you get Stoicism and Epicureanism. Those are the two that you'll be looking at as Greek philosophies, but now popular in the Roman global world, where there's so much pressure, so much anxiety, that what we want is a prescription for peace of mind, to get anxiety out of our minds and pain out of our body. So philosophy becomes dwarfed into the kind of thing you're getting today. You have so many hundreds and hundreds of philosophies, and and people telling you to follow them, and they will give you peace of mind and they will give you happiness. So the global situation you can see reflected in the Roman world, where Epicureanism and Stoicism become the most, very much more popular than they ever were in Athens or in the Greek world. And both of them offer you a quick recipe. All right, follow Epicureanism, gives you a recipe. Believe, all right, it's not science. Scientists look to it because there's a lot of stuff in what Lucretius presents, which is wonderful for science. But as a philosophy of life, it's a philosophy of life. It's not a science. There's nothing more scientific about Epicureanism than any other philosophy. But it presents itself as that this is the heights of, you'll not get involved with politics. You won't have too many friends. You will have safe sex only because you won't want to fall in love. All these things give you pain. Avoid pain. You'll have, why do you have anxiety? Don't worry. The gods are like you. They're good Epicureans. There are gods, but they do all the time is just, is seek their own comfort. So that's what you should do. Seek your own comfort. That's the intelligent way to live. Okay? Do it. Follow it. And then they tell you, if it doesn't work, you can commit suicide. And Stoicism tells you the same thing. Follow us. And if it doesn't work, you can commit suicide. Nobody's going to stop you from doing that. But Stoicism is more the classical approach to philosophy, but again, not as a search, not as something that you need to investigate and continue and develop, but as something khalas, fixed. Believe in Epicureanism, believe in Stoicism, you will have peace of mind. This will be the medicine for the anxiety of the age and for all of that. So very interesting philosophies, each of them great, each of them have much more than just the superficial way I'm presenting them now, but I'm hoping to give you a sense of the whole semester. And the last thing is very important there. How do we present truth? How do we understand truth? How do we process truth? How do we... there are many, many ways we do it. And at a university, you can sort of start to think it has to all be in the computer way, in this kind of a way. So in the ancient world, and in Athens particularly when we get to that, poetry and philosophy as two media of presenting what you think about life will be presented to you in this semester. So you'll get through poetry, Homer and then Oedipus, the king, Sophocles. They will be presenting their view of life through poetry. But it's no less deep or significant or important or effective throughout history than the philosophers. The philosophers take a different approach. The way of, putting things into formulae, putting things into clear arguments that you can deal with. And so therefore I'm over time. Thank you. Yeah, I shall stop. I'm sorry. Anyway, I leave the rest of this to you. The other thing, by the way, is just a very poorly reproduced. That's why I don't want to have to do this anymore. But stuff about the Epic of Gilgamesh, since that's the first reading for this week. You'll have a full lecture next week. Thank you for staying. I'm sorry for keeping you over time. You won't have to see me much anymore. Yeah. Okay. Have a good life. somebody does need to be reminding me when it's 12:50, well, 12:45 actually.